Every band makes mistakes. But some mistakes don't just cost a single show or a bad review. They end careers, destroy friendships, and leave behind some of the most expensive wreckage in music history. Here are 15 of the worst decisions bands ever made. If stories like these are your thing, consider subscribing so you never miss a video. Number 15. Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy.
Said woman, take the time and we'll work it out just fine.
$13 million, 14 years. That is what it cost Axl Rose to make Chinese Democracy, the album that was supposed to prove Guns N' Roses could survive without Slash, Duff McKagan, Izzy Stradlin, or any recognizable version of the original lineup. By the time the record arrived in November 2008, the music world had largely moved on. The production process had become its own mythology, a cautionary tale about unchecked perfectionism and a vanishing budget. Multiple producers were hired and fired, dozens of musicians were brought in and dismissed. The album reportedly went through over 30 different mixes before anyone was satisfied. When it finally landed, Chinese Democracy sold reasonably well in its first week, but generated the kind of critical shrug that money cannot fix. The band that once defined dangerous rock and roll had spent a decade producing an album that sounded expensive and felt inert. Number 14. Creedence Clearwater Revival, The Mardi Gras Decision. Before the Democratic vote, Creedence Clearwater Revival had spent 4 years producing some of the most commercially and critically successful music in rock history. 7 albums, 5 of which reached the top 10. A string of singles that became instant American standards. John Fogerty wrote almost everything, played lead guitar, and sang lead on nearly every track. The band was a tight, almost militarily efficient machine. Then Tom Fogerty left in 1971, and the remaining 3 members made a decision that still baffles music historians. They would record Mardi Gras with all 3 sharing equal songwriting duties, Fogerty included, regardless of ability or inclination. Fogerty, exhausted and resentful, contributed minimally. The result was an album that critics savaged and fans abandoned. CCR disbanded in 1972, the Fogerty brothers' relationship permanently destroyed, leaving behind a catalog far greater than the men who made it were ever able to enjoy. Number 13. Badfinger, Stan Polly. A fraudster, a forged signature, a stolen future. In 1970, Badfinger was signed to the Beatles' Apple Records label and writing genuine success. Their song, Without You, later recorded by Harry Nilsson and Mariah Carey, would become one of the most covered songs in pop history. They had real talent, real momentum, and a real future ahead of them. Then they signed with manager Stan Polly. Polly was a fraudster who systematically siphoned the band's earnings, leaving them financially destitute, despite their commercial activity. When the full extent of the damage became clear, lead vocalist and songwriter Pete Ham was devastated beyond recovery. He died by suicide on April 24, 1975, leaving behind a note that described Polly as a soulless man who had destroyed everything he had worked to build. Bassist Tom Evans died by suicide 8 years later. One bad management decision, made in a moment of trust, ended 2 lives.
Let you know what you should know.
Number 12. Metallica, Firing Dave Mustaine. In a van somewhere between the East Coast and the next gig in 1983, Metallica gave their lead guitarist his notice. Dave Mustaine's drinking and erratic behavior had made him impossible to manage on the road, and the band replaced him with Kirk Hammett from the Bay Area band Exodus before he could even reach home. By any measure, it seemed like a practical personnel decision made by a young band trying to survive. What it actually produced was one of the fiercest rivalries in heavy metal history. Mustaine went home, assembled Megadeth in a fury of wounded pride and technical ambition, and spent the next 4 decades recording and touring at the highest levels of the genre. Megadeth sold over 38 million albums worldwide. Their rivalry with Metallica became the defining creative tension of an entire musical era. Firing Mustaine didn't end his career. It created a second one, and a competitor Metallica never fully escaped. Number 11. Pink Floyd, The Name Dispute.
Have we found the same old fears? Wish you.
The Wall had sold over 30 million copies. The final cut had confirmed Roger Waters as the dominant creative mind in the band. And then Waters announced he was leaving, declaring Pink Floyd a spent force in 1985. He expected that declaration to be final. He did not expect David Gilmour and Nick Mason to announce they were continuing under the Pink Floyd name without him. Waters filed a legal challenge to prevent the use of the name. He lost. Gilmour and Mason pressed on, releasing A Momentary Lapse of Reason in 1987 and touring extensively. Waters toured separately. The two camps did not share a stage again until the Live 8 benefit concert in July 2005, 20 years after the split. Whatever remained of the Floyd legacy spent 2 decades carved in half by a legal dispute that neither side fully won.
My hands felt just like 2 balloons.
That is halfway through our countdown. Now, before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. This community spans the globe, and we love knowing where you all are. Number 10. The Clash, Firing Mick Jones. Stripping out the band's lead guitarist and co-songwriter in 1983 was presented by Joe Strummer and manager Bernie Rhodes as a necessary creative reset. Mick Jones had become too difficult, too rock star, too far from the band's punk roots. Strummer agreed. Jones was out. What followed was Cut the Crap, released in 1985. It is remembered today as one of the most catastrophic swan songs in rock history. A record so stripped of the musical intelligence Jones had brought that critics struggled to connect it to the same band that had made London Calling. The Clash, once routinely called the only band that matters, released a final album that mattered to almost nobody. They disbanded shortly after. Jones, for his part, formed Big Audio Dynamite, moved forward, and never looked back. Number 9. REM, $80 million and terrible timing.
Every waking hour, I'm choosing my confessions.
$80 million is a lot of money to spend on a band that is about to lose the person holding it together. In 1996, REM signed a 5-album deal with Warner Brothers worth approximately $80 million. At the time, one of the largest recording contracts in history. The ink was barely dry when founding drummer Bill Berry suffered a brain aneurysm on tour in Switzerland. He recovered, but left the band the following year, in 1997. Without Berry's contributions to rhythm, arrangement, and group chemistry, REM never recovered its creative equilibrium. That none of their subsequent albums approached the commercial or critical standing of Automatic for the People or Out of Time. The band quietly dissolved in 2011, having spent 15 years and an enormous sum of money searching for a sound they had lost, along with their drummer.
Think I thought I saw you try.
Number 8. Black Sabbath, The Revolving Door. At their commercial peak, Black Sabbath fired Ozzy Osbourne. In hindsight, it is one of the hardest personnel decisions in rock to defend. Osbourne went solo, produced Blizzard of Oz in 1980, and launched one of the longest-running solo careers in heavy metal history. Black Sabbath replaced him with Ronnie James Dio, then Ian Gillan, then Glenn Hughes, then Ray Gillan, then Tony Martin, cycling through lead vocalists across the 1980s and early 90s with diminishing commercial results. Dio was genuinely gifted and produced strong work, but the band's commercial footprint shrank with each subsequent change. Tony Iommi later acknowledged that some of the production choices of that era were mistakes. Their reunion with Osbourne culminated in the album 13, released in 2013. But by then, a generation of relevance had already passed. Number 7. The Doors, The Ed Sullivan Moment.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a lie.
The stage manager's warning had been clear: change the lyric. CBS had approved the performance of Light My Fire on the condition that Jim Morrison dropped the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," a reference they deemed unacceptable for a family broadcast. Morrison agreed. Rehearsal went fine. Then the cameras went live on September 17, 1967, and Morrison sang exactly what he had agreed not to sing, directly into the lens of one of the most watched television programs in America. Ed Sullivan was furious. The planned follow-up appearances, 6 more slots that had already been confirmed, were canceled on the spot. The Doors never appeared on the program again. In the short term, it made Morrison look rebellious and cool. In the career mathematics of 1967, it cost the band one of the most powerful promotional platforms in the country. Number 6. Metallica, suing 300,000 fans.
Life is ours, we live it our way. Holy word.
In April 2000, Metallica filed suit against Napster over the unauthorized sharing of their music on the peer-to-peer file sharing network, which at the time had tens of millions of users. The legal complaint was accompanied by the submission of over 300,000 individual Napster usernames to the platform, demanding that each account be banned. The move was legally defensible, technically correct, and a public relations catastrophe of historic proportions. Overnight, Metallica transformed from one of the most beloved heavy metal acts on the planet into the symbol of an industry fighting its own audience. The Napster lawsuit became a defining moment in the music industry's clumsy response to the digital revolution, and Metallica spent years rebuilding the trust of fans who had felt personally targeted by a band they had spent money and devotion supporting.
Deathly lost, this can't be real. I cannot stand this heavy.
Keep the countdown going. A reaction question before we reach the final 5. Which of these bad decisions do you think hurt a band the most? Drop it in the comments below. Number 5. Fleetwood Mac, recording rumors.
Memories, all that is left for you now. You see your gypsy.
Studio B at the record plant in Sausalito, California, 1976. The most commercially successful album in Fleetwood Mac's history was being recorded simultaneously with the implosion of nearly every personal relationship in the room. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks had recently broken up after years together and were now forced to share microphones and recording time daily. John and Christine McVie's marriage was dissolving in real time. Mick Fleetwood was navigating his own personal crisis. The decision to push forward through all of it, to finish the album regardless of the human wreckage accumulating in the studio, was either an act of extraordinary professional discipline or collective denial. Rumors went on to sell over 40 million copies worldwide and win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 1978. Every member of the band later described the recording period as among the most painful of their lives.
Only me who wants to wrap around your dreams and
Number 4. The Police, stopping at the top.
That's the way, but I am lost at sea. But that's right.
Synchronicity topped charts in the United States and the United Kingdom simultaneously in 1983. The accompanying tour was one of the highest grossing in history. The Police were, by any commercial measure, the biggest band in the world at that moment. They never made another album together. Sting's ambitions had moved beyond the band's framework. Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers were openly feuding, and the creative dynamic that had once produced urgent, percussive, world-influenced pop music had quietly poisoned itself. The band went on what was described as an indefinite hiatus and never formally returned to record new material. Their reunion tour in 2007 and 2008 generated over $350 million in revenue, confirming that the audience was still there, decades after the decision to stop. Some bands break up too soon. The Police broke up exactly when everything they had built was worth the most. Number 3. Van Halen, The Roth Departure. In 1985, David Lee Roth left, or was pushed. Accounts vary. Either way, Van Halen lost the one element that had made them genuinely dangerous and fun. The grinning, acrobatic, self-mythologizing frontman who had turned songs like Jump and Hot for Teacher into stadium events of almost ridiculous energy. Sammy Hagar came in, gave the band its first actual #1 album with 5150 in 1986, and produced 4 more chart toppers. Technically, the Hagar years were commercially successful, but the band's identity, that loose, chaotic, slightly sleazy charm, never fully returned. Roth's solo career produced 2 strong records and then faded. The reunion attempts were complicated by fresh conflicts. The permanent resolution came only with Eddie Van Halen's death in October 2020. The departure that was supposed to free everyone ultimately diminished both parties for decades. Number 2. John Fogerty, sounding like himself. I was sued for sounding like myself, John Fogerty told The Guardian in an interview, describing a legal action so bizarre it sounds invented. It was not invented. Fogerty had signed away ownership of the CCR master recordings to Fantasy Records in the band's early years under contract terms deeply unfavorable to the artists. When he launched his solo career and recorded Old Man Down the Road in 1984, Fantasy sued him for plagiarism, claiming the song was simply his own earlier CCR track Run Through the Jungle, rebranded. The case went to trial in 1988. Fogerty won, but only after spending years in court defending his own creative voice against a company that owned the recordings of that voice. He refused to perform CCR songs live for decades, unwilling to generate any revenue the label might benefit from. The original bad contract decision, made in youth and naivety, haunted him for 30 years. Number 1. Decca Records, turning down the Beatles.
My baby says you're traveling on the one after 909. I said, move over.
Wrong. Completely, expensively wrong. On New Year's Day 1962, Dick Rowe of Decca Records sat through a one-hour audition by an up-and-coming Liverpool band and passed. The group cut 15 tracks in a single session. Rowe's reported conclusion was that guitar groups were on the way out and that the Beatles did not have a future in show business. The Beatles signed with EMI's Parlophone label instead, sold over 600 million records worldwide, and became the best-selling music act in human history. Rowe spent the rest of his career defined by that decision.
Love you like no other, baby, like no other can. Love you like no other, baby.
To his credit, he listened when George Harrison later recommended another young band to him and signed the Rolling Stones in 1962. It was a reasonable recovery. But history remembered only the miss, the day a man in a London office passed on the most commercially successful act who ever lived, because he thought guitar music was done. The single most expensive talent judgment in recorded industry history, delivered in an hour on a holiday.